On the morning of 15 September 1944, the gray waters of the Western Pacific rolled steadily toward a narrow strip of sand known as White Beach 1 on Peleliu Island. Aboard a strange-looking amphibious vehicle, a group of United States Marines from the 1st Marine Division braced themselves for the coming assault. It was not a ship. It was not quite a tank. Officially, it was called the LVT, Landing Vehicle, Tracked, but many senior naval officers had another name for it. They called it a floating tank, and some admirals believed it was little more than an expensive toy. Too slow, too vulnerable, too lightly armored to survive real combat. Yet on this day, hundreds of Marines would depend on it, because what happened next would test whether this unusual machine was truly a toy, or one of the most important inventions of the Pacific War. And before the battle was over, a single wave of these amphibious vehicles would carry nearly 500 Marines directly into one of the most dangerous beach assaults of World War II. Please subscribe to our channel as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life. To understand the importance of the so-called floating tank, we must step back to the early years of the Pacific War. After the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the United States found itself facing a brutal reality. The Japanese Empire controlled thousands of islands across the Pacific Ocean. Many of them were heavily fortified, concrete bunkers, hidden artillery positions, machine gun nests carved into coral cliffs, and almost all of them were surrounded by shallow reefs that made traditional landing craft nearly useless. During early operations like Guadalcanal in 1942, American commanders discovered a dangerous problem. Standard landing boats, such as the LCVP Higgins boat, could not cross coral reefs. Troops were forced to jump into water sometimes hundreds of yards from shore. Loaded down with rifles, ammunition, and packs weighing more than 70 pounds, many soldiers simply drowned. Something had to change. The solution came from an unusual place. In the late 1930s, an eccentric engineer named Donald Roebling had designed a rescue vehicle for the Florida Everglades. It was a strange amphibious craft with wide tracks that could crawl through swamp water and mud. The U.S. Marine Corps saw potential. After modifications, the vehicle became the LVT-1 Alligator. It could float in open water, it could crawl over reefs, and it could carry more than 20 fully equipped Marines directly onto the beach. But the early versions had problems. They had almost no armor, their engines were exposed, and if enemy fire hit them, they could burn quickly. Because of this, many Navy officers doubted them. Some even joked that they were floating coffins. But the Marines saw them differently. To the Marines, they were the only machines capable of delivering men across deadly reefs and straight into battle. By 1944, newer versions like the LVT-4 and LVT-A4 amphibious tank were being produced. These carried 75mm howitzers, machine guns, and thicker armor plating. Still, skeptics remained. Admirals questioned whether these vehicles could survive against determined defenders. But in the coming battle, they would get their answer. The test would come on Peleliu Island. Located in the Palau Islands, Peleliu was a small coral island barely 6 miles long. But strategically, it was critical. The island contained a Japanese airfield capable of threatening American operations in the Philippines. The mission to capture it fell to the 1st Marine Division, commanded by Major General William H. Rupertus. Opposing them were roughly 10,900 Japanese troops under Colonel Kunio Nakagawa. Unlike earlier Pacific battles, the Japanese had developed a new defensive strategy. Instead of charging in suicidal attacks, they constructed deep underground fortifications, hundreds of caves, hidden artillery, machine gun positions carved into the jagged coral ridges of Umurbrogol Mountain. The Americans would later call it Bloody Nose Ridge. On the morning of 15th of September 1944, the invasion force gathered offshore. More than 100 amphibious tractors prepared to carry the first assault waves. Each LVT packed with Marines, rifles clutched tightly, helmets strapped down, faces tense. At Iwo 8:15 hours, the pre-invasion bombardment intensified. Battleships like the USS Pennsylvania and USS Tennessee fired massive 14-inch shells into the island. Carrier aircraft roared overhead, dropping bombs on suspected Japanese positions. The air smelled of smoke and burning coral. Many American commanders believed the island had been shattered by the bombardment. But beneath the shattered terrain, Japanese soldiers waited silently in reinforced caves. Their machine guns aimed directly at the beaches, their artillery carefully hidden. They had survived the bombardment almost completely intact, and they were ready. At 08:30 hours, the first wave of amphibious vehicles began moving toward the beach. Dozens of LVTs churned through the surf, their tracks clawing through the water. Inside them rode nearly 500 Marines, members of the 1st, 5th, and 7th Marine Regiments. As the vehicles approached the reef, the sea suddenly grew shallow. Traditional landing craft would have stopped here, but the LVTs kept moving. Their tracks gripped the coral reef. Slowly, relentlessly, they crawled forward. Then the Japanese opened fire. Machine guns erupted from hidden bunkers. Artillery shells slammed into the water. Mortars burst overhead. Within seconds, the peaceful Pacific shoreline became a wall of explosions. One LVT erupted into flames after a direct artillery hit. Another flipped sideways as a mortar struck its track. Inside the vehicles, Marines ducked as bullets slammed into metal armor. Still, the drivers pushed forward. They knew stopping meant death, and the beach was still 200 yards away. By 0900 hours, the situation was becoming desperate. The Japanese defenses were far stronger than expected. Hidden Type 92, heavy machine guns swept the beach. Mortar shells exploded between incoming vehicles. Entire sections of coral erupted as artillery struck the reef. For the Marines trapped inside the LVTs, the ride was terrifying. The vehicles rocked violently as shells splashed nearby. Bullets punched through thin armor. Men could hear fragments ricocheting inside the hull. Yet the drivers kept moving. Then one of the lead vehicles struck the beach. Its ramp dropped. Marines poured out into the sand. Immediately they came under heavy fire. Machine guns from concealed bunkers cut down several men before they even reached cover. But more LVTs kept arriving, each one unloading another group of Marines. Some vehicles carried amphibious tanks armed with 75mm howitzers. These guns began firing directly into Japanese positions. Shells smashed into bunkers. Machine gun nests exploded into clouds of dust. Still, the defenders fought on. Within the first hour, dozens of amphibious vehicles had been damaged or destroyed. The beach was littered with burning wreckage, yet something remarkable was happening. Despite the ferocious fire, the LVTs kept delivering troops. Wave after wave, the vehicles crossed the reef where no other craft could go. Without them, Marines would have been forced to wade hundreds of yards through exposed water. Instead, they reached the shore faster, and with heavy weapons. But the worst fighting was still ahead. By 1100 hours, Japanese artillery found the range. Shells began hitting the beach with frightening accuracy. Several LVTs attempting to bring in reinforcements were destroyed before reaching shore. One vehicle carrying ammunition exploded in a massive fireball. Still, the drivers returned again and again. Some of them made 4 or 5 trips through enemy fire, each time carrying more Marines, each time risking destruction. Fear gripped the men, but there was no turning back, because by now, nearly 500 Marines depended on those vehicles to keep the assault alive. By early afternoon, the battle hung in the balance. Japanese defenders still controlled large sections of the beach. Machine guns continued firing from hidden caves. Casualties among the Marines were rising rapidly. But the amphibious vehicles had accomplished something critical. They had landed hundreds of Marines quickly enough to establish a fragile foothold. Using the cover of wrecked LVTs and shattered coral, Marine units began pushing inland. Flamethrower teams advanced toward bunker entrances. Engineers placed demolition charges against cave openings. Meanwhile, amphibious tanks continued firing their 75mm howitzers directly into Japanese fortifications. Each blast shook the coral cliffs. Slowly, bunker after bunker fell silent. The Marines pushed forward yard by yard. By 1600 hours, they had captured the island's airfield, but the fighting was far from over. Japanese defenders retreated into the mountain caves of the Umerbrogel Ridge. There they would continue resisting for more than 2 brutal months. Yet the critical moment of the battle, the landing itself, had succeeded. And it succeeded largely because of those amphibious vehicles. Despite being mocked as toys, the so-called floating tanks had carried nearly 500 Marines across a deadly reef and directly onto the battlefield. Without them, the assault could have collapsed before it even began. The Battle of Peleliu became one of the most brutal fights of the Pacific War. The island was not declared secure until 27 November 1944. American casualties were staggering. The 1st Marine Division suffered more than 6,500 casualties, including over 1,200 killed. Japanese losses were even greater. Of the nearly 10,900 defenders, fewer than 200 survived. But the battle also proved the value of amphibious warfare technology. The LVT vehicles, once dismissed by some admirals as toys, had proven essential. They delivered troops across reefs, they provided mobile firepower, and they kept supply lines open during the most dangerous phase of the invasion. In later operations, including Iwo Jima and Okinawa, amphibious tractors would become standard equipment for assault landings. The men who operated them, drivers, gunners, mechanics, rarely received the same recognition as infantry or tank crews. But their courage was undeniable. Many LVT crews were awarded Bronze Stars and Navy Crosses for their actions during Pacific landings. Their machines were not invincible. They were thinly armored and dangerously exposed. Yet time and again they drove straight toward enemy fire, carrying Marines who depended on them. And in the chaos of amphibious warfare, that made all the difference. The strange vehicle, once mocked as a floating tank, had proven its worth in the crucible of combat. On the beaches of Peleliu, it carried hundreds of Marines through gunfire, artillery, and chaos, giving them the chance to fight and survive. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to our channel as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.